Every neighborhood has its stories, and every cul-de-sac seems to breed one person who thrives on control, conflict, and constant complaints. In our quiet suburban community, that person was Karen. She was the self-proclaimed guardian of the rules, the loudest voice in every meeting, and the eyes that never stopped watching. If you left your trash can out an hour too long, she'd take a picture and send it to the HOA. If your grass grew a little too high, she'd stand in front of your house shaking her head until you noticed. She was the type of neighbor that made you double-check every little thing, because you knew if you slipped once, she would be there with a letter, a fine, or at the very least, a nasty comment. Karen lived in a 2-story house at the edge of the cul-de-sac, the one with the red shutters and the spotless driveway. Every morning, without fail, she'd be outside sweeping her porch, glaring at anyone who dared to walk a dog past her perfect lawn. She seemed to have nothing better to do than monitor the lives of everyone around her, and over the years she made enemies out of nearly all of us. It wasn't just about the rules. Karen had a way of making you feel like you were beneath her. She treated renters as if they were invaders, families with kids as if they were pests, and pet owners as criminals waiting to be caught. She had filed so many complaints against the Johnsons for their barking dog that the poor family eventually had to give the animal away. She had threatened to sue the Millers because their teenage son parked his car too close to her curb. She even once called the police because she swore the new couple on the block were running an illegal business just because they had a few packages delivered to their house. Nobody liked her, but she was unavoidable. She inserted herself into everything. HOA meetings became battlegrounds because she always found a way to dominate the discussion, twisting every minor issue into a personal crusade. It got to the point where most of us stopped attending just to avoid dealing with her. But even then, her influence spread because she never stopped talking. Gossip and threats were her tools, and she wielded them well. For years, she was the constant background noise of our lives. And then, suddenly, she wasn't. It started quietly. One morning, Karen didn't appear on her porch. Her broom leaned against the railing, untouched. At first, nobody thought much of it. People get busy, people go away. But as the days stretched into weeks, we began to notice more. Her car stayed in the driveway, unmoved. Newspapers piled up on her doorstep. Mail overflowed from the box. Her lights stayed off at night. At first, the whispers were almost gleeful. Some neighbors joked that maybe she had finally gotten tired of us and moved away. Others said maybe she had gone to stay with relatives. But as time passed, the unease began to grow. No moving truck had ever come. No for sale sign appeared. And the house, once obsessively cared for, began to show signs of neglect. The grass grew wild. The flowers in her garden withered. Leaves collected on the porch. The shutters began to fade under the relentless sun. It was strange to see the house in such disrepair because Karen had always been the type to scold others for the smallest imperfections. Now her own home was becoming the neighborhood's eyesore. We thought the HOA would step in, but even they seemed powerless. The president admitted quietly that no dues had been paid from her house in months. Yet, no one could reach her. Letters went unanswered. Phone calls rang endlessly. Even certified mail returned unclaimed. Eventually, the HOA stopped trying. It was as if Karen had simply erased herself from existence. But the real unease began when the noises started. It was subtle at first. Neighbors walking their dogs late at night claimed they heard something inside. A creak of floorboards, a muffled thump. Sometimes what sounded like a television faintly playing, though no light came from the windows. Most of us brushed it off. Old houses make sounds. But the stories kept piling up. The Petersons swore they saw movement behind the curtains one night. The Sanchez kids said they heard someone calling their names from the backyard. Even I, one sleepless evening, thought I heard a faint knocking when I passed by on my nightly walk. When I looked at the house, it stood in silence, its windows black and hollow. Speculation ran wild. Some said Karen had died inside and her body was still there. Others believed she had been taken, maybe kidnapped, and the noises were just echoes of the house settling. A few whispered darker theories, that she hadn't really left, that she was still in there, watching, waiting, punishing us with her silence instead of her words. No one was brave enough to find out. We all avoided that end of the street when we could. Kids dared each other to touch the porch at night, but even they never lingered long. The house became a shadow in our neighborhood, a reminder that something was not right, that Karen's absence was somehow worse than her presence. Months turned into years, and still the house remained untouched. No buyers, no relatives, no official notice. Just an empty shell where Karen had once ruled over us. And always, the strange noises that no one could explain. It was as if the house itself had absorbed her spirit, as if her constant need to watch and control had fused with the walls. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, I swore I could hear her voice, muttering, complaining, judging, from somewhere deep inside. The neighborhood tried to move on, but the mystery of Karen's disappearance never left us. Every block party, every meeting, every whispered conversation eventually circled back to her. Where did she go? Why had no one come looking for her? And what exactly was happening inside that house now that it stood alone? And then, one night, something happened that made ignoring it impossible. Something that forced us to admit that Karen's disappearance was not just strange, but sinister. The night it happened was like any other. Quiet streets, porch lights glowing faintly, the hum of distant traffic. Most families had settled in, their blinds drawn, their televisions flickering behind the glass. Nothing seemed out of place until the scream. It wasn't long, just a sharp, blood-curdling cry that pierced the stillness and then cut off, leaving only silence in its wake. It came from the direction of Karen's house. Several neighbors rushed to their windows, hearts pounding, straining to hear more, but the street lay motionless, every shadow steady, every tree frozen in the moonlight. The scream had been real. We all knew it. And yet, when a few of the braver residents gathered their courage and crept toward the house, they found nothing. The porch was empty. The windows were dark. The door was still locked tight, just as it had been for years. No one entered. No one dared. The group scattered quickly, each retreating to their own homes, pretending nothing had happened. But the scream lingered in our minds. By morning, word had spread across the entire neighborhood, and the whispers began again. Some said it was kids playing a prank. Others claimed it was just an animal. But deep down, none of us believed it. We all knew that house was not normal anymore. Something was inside it, and whatever it wasn't friendly. From then on, the activity grew worse. At night, people reported lights flickering faintly behind the curtains, even though the power had long been shut off. Cars passing by swore they saw shadows crossing in front of the windows. Dogs refused to walk past the house, tugging their leashes and whining until their owners dragged them away. The Sanchez kids, always daring each other to do the unthinkable, snuck into the backyard one afternoon. They returned pale and shaken, swearing that the sliding glass door at the back had been wide open, even though everyone knew it was supposed to be locked. They heard whispering, too, a voice repeating the same words over and over, too faint to understand, but insistent. They ran before finding out more. By now, Karen had been gone for nearly 3 years. 3 years of unanswered questions, 3 years of watching her perfect home rot into something dark and unsettling. We tried to bring the authorities in. The HOA president, Mrs. Taylor, filed reports with the county, asking if the house could be seized or inspected. The police checked once, shining their flashlights through the dusty windows. But when they Found nothing unusual, they left, uninterested in the ramblings of a paranoid neighborhood. But the noises never stopped. In fact, they escalated. On rainy nights, some claimed to hear pounding on the walls from inside, as though someone was trying to escape. On windy evenings, a figure appeared on the porch, rocking back and forth in a chair that wasn't really there. More than once, packages meant for other residents were mistakenly dropped off at Karen's house. None were ever retrieved. When delivery drivers were asked, they insisted someone had signed for them. But who? The turning point came when a new family moved in across from the abandoned home. The Clarks had 2 small children and no knowledge of Karen or her reputation. At first, they thought nothing of it. To them, it was just an empty house across the street. But that changed within weeks. Their youngest daughter began waking up crying every night, pointing toward the window that faced Karen's house. She claimed an angry lady was standing at the glass, staring at her. The parents laughed it off, assuming it was nightmares. But the girl's screams became so consistent, so desperate, that even they began to wonder. Then came the night, when Mr. Clark himself admitted he saw something. Coming home late from work, he parked his car and glanced up, only to see a pale face watching him from the second-floor window of Karen's house. He froze, staring, and in that instant, the curtains snapped shut, as though pulled by an invisible hand. By then, even the skeptics in the neighborhood couldn't deny it anymore. Something was inside that house, something tied to Karen, something that wanted to be noticed. We gathered in hushed groups to discuss what should be done. Some suggested breaking in to see what was really happening. Others refused, convinced that stepping foot inside would mean never coming back out. The HOA tried to reach Karen's last known relatives, but found nothing. It was as if her entire existence had been erased. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no trace. And yet, the house remained, standing like a scar at the end of the street, growing darker, more sinister with each passing season. The breaking point came one October night during a neighborhood Halloween party. Children ran laughing through the streets, parents sipped hot cider, and for a moment, the community felt alive again. But as the evening drew to a close, a group of kids dared each other to knock on Karen's door. They crept up the porch, giggling, nervously, and rapped 3 times against the peeling wood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. The children screamed and bolted back down the driveway, swearing the door had opened a crack on its own. And when the adults checked, sure enough, the door was ajar, though no one had the courage to push it further. That night, the house no longer felt empty. It felt awake, alive, waiting. And in that moment, we realized something none of us wanted to admit. Karen might be gone, but whatever was inside that house was not. By the time the door creaked open on that October night, fear had already rooted itself deep in our neighborhood. No one slept soundly anymore. Windows were kept shut, blinds drawn, locks double-checked. Children weren't allowed outside after dark, and even the bravest among us avoided walking past Karen's house. The HOA tried to downplay it, of course. They sent out newsletters reminding us not to spread baseless rumors that might lower property values. But the fear was real, gnawing at us every day. The open door had changed everything. For years, Karen's home had been silent, only whispering through shadows and noises. Now, it was inviting, open, watching. And soon enough, something came through. The Clarks, already shaken by their daughter's nightmares, were the first to report what happened next. Late one night, Mrs. Clark woke to the sound of footsteps inside her house. At first, she thought it was her husband. But when she checked, he was asleep beside her. Terrified, she followed the sound, only to find her front door slightly ajar. Across the street, Karen's house sat in the dark, its door once again wide open. From then on, the activity spread. It wasn't confined to Karen's home anymore. Shadows flickered across other porches, Doors slammed shut without wind, and strange knocking echoed from inside garages and attics. It was as if the house had spilled over, infecting everything around it. And through it all, whispers grew louder. They weren't just faint murmurs anymore. They carried words, though hard to catch. A few swore they heard Karen's voice, muttering in anger, repeating phrases she had barked at us when she was alive. "This is my street. You don't belong here. You'll regret this." It was her. Somehow it had always been her. That was when the older residents began sharing what they had never said aloud before. Back when Karen lived here, she had been more than just a nuisance, more than just a difficult neighbor. She had been obsessed with the neighborhood, its rules, its image, its perfection. She was known to keep journals, detailed logs of every resident's movements, every violation of her standards. She even filed legal threats over minor issues like paint colors and trash cans left out overnight. But there were rumors of darker things, too. Disputes that escalated, families who moved away suddenly without explanation, arguments that ended with Karen smiling in a way that didn't feel right. Some whispered she had connections, others thought she was just manipulative. But now, years later, it felt as though her obsession hadn't ended with her disappearance. It had rooted itself into the walls of her home, festering, growing, waiting. One winter evening, just before Christmas, something happened that none of us could ignore. Snow had fallen thick across the street, blanketing everything in white silence. But when we woke the next morning, there were footprints, clear, deliberate tracks leading from Karen's porch, across the road, right up to several houses, including mine. The prints didn't stop at the doors. They circled the houses, lingered by the windows, and then simply vanished, as though whoever made them had disappeared into the air. By now, even the HOA couldn't deny what was happening. They organized an emergency meeting in the community, hall packed with anxious faces. Some demanded an exorcism, others begged for demolition of the house. A few insisted we call the FBI, convinced Karen had faked her disappearance and was still somehow inside, living in the walls like a ghost. But in the end, nothing was decided. Everyone was too afraid to act, too afraid to take responsibility for what might happen if we disturbed whatever was inside. So the house remained. The years dragged on, and its grip on us only tightened. New families moved in and quickly moved back out. The Clarks lasted the longest, but eventually, they too left in the middle of the night, never saying goodbye. Their house has been empty ever since, a silent companion to Karen's. The strange thing is, no official record exists of her disappearance. Police files don't mention it. No missing persons report was ever filed. It's as if she never existed at all, except in our memories, and in the restless energy that still clings to her house. Now, over a decade later, Karen's home still sits at the end of the street. Its shutters hang loose, its roof sagging, its windows coated in grime. But no one dares to go near. Children grow up hearing the stories, daring each other to run across her porch, but none stay long enough to push open the door. At night, the noises continue. Sometimes it's a woman's voice, scolding, angry, filled with venom. Sometimes it's crying. Sometimes it's laughter, always faint, always coming from inside. And though we try to tell ourselves she's gone, that she vanished without explanation, the truth is harder to ignore with each passing year. She hasn't left. She never did. Karen is still here. She's waiting.